Chapter 2. In order to get a better sense of exactly how the Baudelaire orphans felt as they began the grueling journey up the stairs to Mr. and Mrs. Squaller's penthouse apartment, you might find it useful to close your eyes as you read this chapter because the light was so dim from the small candles on the ground that it felt as if their eyes were closed, even when they were looking as hard as they could. At each curve in the staircase, there was a door that led to the apartment on each floor, and a pair of sliding elevator doors. From behind the sliding elevator doors, the youngsters, of course, heard nothing, as the elevator had been shut down, but behind the doors to the apartments, the children could hear the noises of people who lived in the building. When they reached the 7th floor, they heard 2 men laughing as if somebody had told a joke. When they reached the 12th floor, they heard the splashing of water as somebody took a bath. When they reached the 19th floor, they heard a woman said, "Let them eat cake," in a voice with a strange accent. I wonder what people will hear when we walk by the penthouse apartment. Violet wondered out loud when we are living there. I hope they hear me turning pages, Klaus said. Maybe Mr. and Mrs. Squaller will have some interesting books to read. Or maybe they will hear me using my wrench, Violet said. I hope the Squallers have some tools they let me use for my inventing. Crikey, Sonny said, crawling carefully past one of the candles on the ground. Violet looked down at her and smiled. I don't think that'll be a problem, Sonny, she said. You usually find something or other to bite. Be sure to speak up when you want us to carry you, though. I wish somebody would carry me, Klaus said, clutching the banister for support and getting tired. Me too, Violet admitted. You would think after Count Olaf made us run all those laps when he was distinguished as a gym school teacher that these stairs wouldn't tire us out at all. But that's not the case. What floor are we on anyways? I don't know, Klaus said. The doors aren't numbered. I've lost count. Well, we won't miss the penthouse, Violet said. It's on the top floor, so we'll just keep walking until the stairs stop. I wish you could invent a device that would take us up the stairs, Klaus said. Violet smiled, although her sibling couldn't see it in the darkness. That device has been invented a long time ago, she said. It's called an elevator. But elevators are out, remember? Klaus smiled too. And tired feet are in, apparently, he said. Remember that time, Violet said, when our parents attended the 16th annual Run-a-thon, and their feet were so tired when they got home that Dad prepared dinner while sitting on the kitchen floor instead of standing? Of course I remember, Klaus said. We had only salad, because they couldn't stand up and reach the stove. It would have been a perfect meal for Aunt Josephine, Violet said, remembering the one Baudelaire's previous gardenings. She never wanted to use the stove because she thought it might explode. Palmer's, Sonny said sadly. She meant something along the lines of, as it turns out, the stove was the least of Aunt Josephine's problems. It's true, Violet said quietly, as the children heard someone sneeze from behind another door. I wonder what the Squallers will be like, Klaus said. Well, they must be wealthy to live in Dark Avenue, Violet said. A crowfield, Sonny said, which meant something like, and they're not afraid of heights, that's for sure. Klaus smiled and looked down at his sister. You sound tired, Sonny, he said. Violet and I can take turns carrying you. We'll switch every 3 floors. Violet nodded in agreement with Klaus's plan and then said yes out loud because she realized that her nod was invisible in the gloom. They continued up the staircase, and I'm sorry to say that the 2 older Baudelaires took many, many turns holding Sonny. If the Baudelaires had been going up the stairs of regular size, I could write the sentence, up and up they went, but a more appropriate sentence would be up and up and up and up and up. And would take 84, either 48 or either 84 pages to reach they went, because the staircase was so unbelievably lengthy. Occasionally they would pass the shadowy figure or someone else walking down the stairs, but the children were too tired to even say good afternoon, and later good evening, to these other residents of 667 Dark Avenue. The Baudelaires grew hungry, they grew achy, and they grew very tired of the gazing at the identical candles and the steps and the doors. Just when they couldn't stand it any longer, they reached another candle and another step and another door, and about 5 flights after that, the stairs finally ended and deposited the tired children in the small room with one last candle sitting on the middle of the carpet. By the light of the candle, the Baudelaire orphans could see the door to their new home, and across the way 2 pairs of sliding elevator doors with arrowed buttons alongside. Just think, Violet said, panting from her long walk up the stairs. If elevators were in, we would arrive at the Squaller's penthouse in just a few minutes. Well, maybe they'll be back in soon, Klaus said. I hope so. The other doors must be to the Squaller's apartment. Let's knock. They knocked on the door, and almost instantly it swung open to reveal a tall man wearing a suit with long, narrow stripes down it. Such a suit is called a pinstripe suit, and it's usually worn by people who are either movie stars or gangsters. I thought I heard someone approaching the door, the man said, giving the children a smile that was so big they could see even in the dim room. Please come in. My name is Jerome Squalor, and I'm so happy that you've come to stay with us. I'm very pleased to meet you, Mr. Squalor, Violet said, still panting, as she and her siblings walked into the entryway, almost as dim as the staircase. I'm Violet Baudelaire, and this is my brother Klaus and my sister Sunny. Goodness, you sound out of breath, Mr. Squalor said. Luckily, I can think of two things to do about that. One is, you can stop calling me Mr. Squalor and start calling me Jerome, and I'll call you three by your first names too. And that way, we'll save breath. The second thing is that I make you a nice cold martini. Come right this way. Martini? Klaus said, isn't that an alcoholic beverage? Well, usually it is, Jerome agreed, but right now, alcoholic martinis are out. Aqueous martinis are in. An aqueous martini is simply cold water served in a fancy glass with an olive in it. So it's perfectly legal for children as well as for adults. I've never had an aqueous martini, Violet said, but I'll try one. Aha, Jerome said, you're adventurous. I like that in a person. Your mother was adventurous too, you know. She and I were very good friends way back. We hiked up Mount Fraught with some friends. Gosh, it must have been 20 years ago. Mount Fraught was known for having dangerous animals on it, but your mother wasn't afraid. But then, swooping out of the sky, Jerome! Who was that at the door? Called the voice from the room next door. And in walked a tall, slender woman, also dressed in a pinstripe suit. She had long fingernails that were so strongly polished that they shone even in the dim light. The Baudelaire children, of course, Jerome replied. But they're not coming today, the woman cried. Of course they are, Jerome said. I've been looking forward to it for days and days. You know, he said, turning from the woman to the Baudelaires, I wanted to adopt you from the start in the moment that I heard about the fire, but unfortunately it was impossible. Orphans were out then, the woman explained. Now they're in. My wife is always very attentive to what's in and what's out, Jerome said. I don't care about it much, but Esme feels differently. She was the one who insisted on having the elevator removed. Esme, I was just about to make them some aqueous martinis. Would you like that one? Or would you like one? Oh, yes, Esme cried. Aqueous martinis are in. She walked quickly over to the children and looked them over. I'm Esme Gigi Jevanine Squalor, the city's sixth most important financial advisor, she announced grandly. Even though I am unbelievably wealthy, you may call me Esme. I'll learn your names later. I'm very happy that you're here because orphans are in. And when all my friends hear that I have 3 real orphans, they'll be sick with jealousy, won't they, Jerome? I hope not, Jerome said, leading the children down a long, dim hallway to a huge room filled with various fancy couches and chairs and tables. And at the far end of the room was a series of windows, all with their shades drawn so that no light could get in. I don't like to hear of anybody getting sick. We'll have a seat, children, and we'll tell you a little bit about our new home. The Baudelaires sat down in 3 huge chairs, grateful for the opportunity to rest their feet. Jerome crossed to one of the tables where a pitcher of water sat near the bowl of olives and some fancy glasses and quickly prepared the aqueous martinis. Here you go, he said, handing Esme and the children each a fancy glass. Let's see. In case you ever get lost, remember that your new address is 667 Dark Avenue in the penthouse apartment. Oh, please, don't tell them any silly things like that, Esme said, waving her long-nailed hand in front of her face as if a moth were attacking it. Children, here are some things you should know. Dark is in, light is out. Stairs are in, elevators are out. Pinstripe suits are in. Those horrible clothes you're wearing are out. What Esme means, Jerome said quickly, is that we want you to feel comfortable. Violet took a sip of her aqueous martini. She was not surprised to find that it tasted like plain water with a slight hint of olive. She didn't like it much, but it did quench her thirst from the long climb up the stairs. That's very nice of you, she said. Mr. Poe told me about some of your previous guardians, Jerome said, shaking his head. I feel awful that you've had such terrible experience and that we couldn't have cared for you this entire time. It couldn't be helped, Esme said. When something is out, it's out, and orphans used to be out. I heard all about this Count Olaf person, too, Jerome said. I told the doorman not to let anyone in the building who even looked vaguely like that despicable man, so you should be safe. That's a relief, Klaus said. That dreadful man is supposed to be up in the mountains anyways, Esme said. Remember, Jerome? That unstylish banker said he was going away in a helicopter to find those twins he kidnapped? Actually, Violet said, they're triplets. The Quagmires are good friends of ours. My word, Jerome said, you must be worried sick. Well, if they find them soon, Esme said, maybe we'll adopt them too. 5 orphans? Oh, I'll be the innest person in town. We certainly have room for them, Jerome said. This is a 71-bedroom apartment, children. So you have your pick of the rooms. Klaus, Poe mentioned something about you being interested in inventing things. Is that right? My sister is an inventor, Klaus replied. I'm more of a researcher myself. Well then, Jerome said, you can have the bedroom next to the library. And Violet can have the one that has a large wooden bench, perfect for keeping tools. Sunny can be in the room between you two. How does that sound? That sounded absolutely splendid, of course, but the Baudelaire orphans did not get an opportunity to say so because the telephone rang just that instant. Oh, I'll get it, Esme cried and raced across the room to pick up the phone. Squalor residence, she said into the receiver, and then waited as the person spoke on the other end. Yes, this is Mrs. Squalor. Yes? 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 Oh, thank you, thank you. She hung up the phone and turned to the children. Guess what, she said. I have some fantastic news on what we were talking about. Quagmires have been found? Klaus asked hopefully. Who? Esme said. Oh, them? No, they haven't been found. Don't be silly. Jerome, children, listen to me. Dark is out. Regular light is in. Well, I'm not sure I'd call that fantastic news, Jerome said, but it will be a relief to get some light around this place. Come on, Baudelaires. Help me open the shades and you can get a look around at our views. You can see quite a bit from up so high up. I'll go turn on all the lamps in the penthouse, Esme said breathlessly. Quickly, before anyone sees it, this apartment is still dark. Esme dashed from the room while Jerome gave the three siblings a little shrug and walked across the room to the windows. The Baudelaires followed him and helped him open the heavy shades that were covering the windows. Instantly, sunlight streamed into the room, making them squint at their eyes adjusted to the regular light. If the Baudelaires had looked around the room now that it was properly illuminated, they would have seen just how fancy all the furniture was. The couches had pillows embroidered with silver, the chairs were all painted with gold paint, and the tables were made from wood chopped away from some of the most expensive trees in the world. But the Baudelaire orphans were not looking around the room, as luxurious as it was. They were looking out the window onto the city. Spectacular view, don't you think? Jerome asked them, and they nodded in agreement. It was as if they were looking out a tiny, tiny city, with matchboxes instead of buildings and bookmarks instead of streets. They could see tiny colored shapes that looked like various insects, but they really were all cars and carriages in town, driving along the bookmarks until they reached the matchboxes where the tiny dots of people lived and worked. The Baudelaires could see the neighborhood where they had lived with their parents, in the parts of town where their friends had lived, and in the faint blue strip far, far away, the beach where they had received the terrible news that had begun all their misfortune. I knew you would like it, Jerome said. It's very expensive to live in the penthouse apartment, but I think it's worth the view for something like this. Look, those tiny round boxes over there are orange juice factories. That sort of purplish building next to the park is my favorite restaurant. Oh, look, straight down. They're already cutting down those awful trees that made it so dark. Of course they're cutting them down, Esme said, hurrying back into the room and blowing out a few candles that were sitting on the mantelpiece. Regular light is in, as is aqueous martinis, pinstripes, and orphans. Violet, Klaus, and Sunny looked straight down and saw that Jerome was right. Those strange trees that blocked out the sunlight on Dark Avenue, looking no taller than paper clips, were at such great heights, were now being chopped down by little tiny gardener dots. Even though the trees had made the street seem so gloomy, it seemed a shame to tear them all down, leaving bare stumps that, from the penthouse window, looked like thumbtacks. The three siblings looked at one another and then back down at Dark Avenue. Those trees were no longer in, so the gardeners were getting rid of them. And the Baudelaires did not like to think of what would happen when orphans were no longer in either. Chapter 3. Got some pinstripe bags. So in.